Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started now. I want to thank everyone so much for joining us tonight at our City Council meeting on Tuesday, April 5th. I'm Mayor Ashley Stolzman, and I don't have to read a script tonight for being electronic for the first time in like 2 years, so that's sort of fantastic. So I will call our meeting to order, and I will ask City Clerk Muth for a roll call.
Mayor Stolzman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Here.
Councilmember Brown?
Here.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Here.
Councilmember Fahey?
Here.
Councilmember Lay?
Here.
Councilmember Most?
Thank you, everyone. Will you please rise, everyone, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Could I please get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve. Second.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion of the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. That takes us to our first public comment period tonight, which is public comment on items that are not on our agenda and items that show up only on our consent agenda. Out in the lobby area, you'll find a sign-up comment card, a speaker comment card. So if you would like to comment on items that are not on our agenda or items that only appear on the consent agenda or any other topic, you can fill out a sign-up card and please hand it to the city clerk, and then we'll go ahead and call on you on those different times during the agenda. If you've logged on online and you're liking to speak through Zoom, you can raise your hand by dialing *9, or you can raise your hand icon that you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom panel, and we'll be able to call on you that way as well. So first this evening on items that are not on our agenda is John Pendergraft. John? And just as a reminder to everyone, if you'll please tell us your name and your address, and then you'll have 3 minutes to tell us what you'd like to tell us. Thank you, John.
My name is John Pendergraft, and I live at 2559 North Franklin Avenue, north end of town. And what I'd like to talk about tonight is the city possibly considering putting in a bike path, and I provided those aerial photos. And basically from Courtesy Road to Arthur Avenue, it's a really short little stretch, and it would be, I feel confident a lot of people would use it. I know there's at least 3 people in my shop that would use it. I'd use it probably almost daily. There's people have already, cut in a little bit of a path there, and the fence is raised up, so people are already using that area. But it would be fantastic if there was an actual bike path along there. It would cut a lot of distance for people, in Louisville proper. If they're working in the tech center, they could shoot up there by bike a lot more rapidly than they have to go all the way out Empire Road and get that north access. So that would be fantastic. One other thing I would like to talk about is the speed limit on Courtesy Road. It seems like I don't know, that stretch feels like it probably ought to be about 35 miles an hour, and it's 45. And on the east side of Courtesy Road, there's spots where there's very little bike lane. So I mean, you're just right there with cars, and it's pretty fast along there. And it seems to me ironic that it's 45 along that stretch, and then you get further south and to a more rural setting, and the speed limit drops to 40 miles an hour, and that seems a little strange. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
Right, thanks a lot.
Next on items not on our agenda, we have Liv and Shay Hirsch. And Liv and Shay have pooled their time, so they'll have 6 minutes. If it would be easier, we could put the microphone on the table on the corner there, and they could stand there if that would be more favorable.
Dear City Council and Kurt Howard, my name is Liv Hirsch, and my name is Shay Hirsch. and we are 9 years old, and we live at 2235 East Hecla Drive, Unit B, Louisville, Colorado 80027. We think that pollinators are good because without them, we won't have a lot of food. Did you know that 1 out of every 4 bites of food depends on pollinators? As the city of Louisville begins to resurface roads like 104th Street, please consider creating pollinator pathways in the medians. Pollinator pathways are important because native plants attract a variety of pollinators. This is also a climate solution because when we plant more native plants, they take CO2 out of the air. Another benefit of replacing concrete with soil that the soil can store carbon, and it reduces the heat island effect. Also, the native pollinator plants will look a lot better than the concrete, and they will not take much water. We are asking you to set aside money to create pollinator pathways in Louisville to attract pollinators, fight climate change, store carbon, reduce heat, and provide beautiful flowers for our town. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming tonight to tell us about pollinators and pollinator pathways. We really appreciate it. Next, we have an online comment from Lori and Doug Johnson.
Hi, I was wondering if you could please turn on closed captioning.
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for reminding us. And we'll just, I assume we can make that happen with this hybrid meeting, and we will work on it right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Chief Wilson.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, City Manager, City staff. I'm just glad I didn't have to follow those two. That was going to be a tough one to follow. I'm here just to talk real quick about the consent agenda number B, the South 104th Street resurfacing. I support it. I support it. I support it. I support it. It's a challenge to drive our fire trucks down that street going back to our stations. I see city backhoes and dump trucks going down that road. I see semis and all kinds of things, and that road is just, it's hard to travel. So I support whatever we can do. So Kurt, I'm behind you. Thanks.
Thank you, Chief. Next, we have Josh Cooperman.
Hi, I'm Josh Cooperman. I live at 216 Griffith Street. Can I ask a quick question? May we pool time with someone who is not in attendance?
So the way, just for everybody's information, the way time pooling works is if someone is virtual or in person, then you can pool time with them.
Thanks. Okay, then I'll try to keep my comments to 3 minutes. I would also like to speak to consent agenda item B, the 104th Street resurfacing. At the last City Council meeting, I asked that you convert the medians along 104th Street from asphalt expanses to native plant beds in conjunction with resurfacing this road. Now that you have the resurfacing contract before you, I am here to make this request once again. Several months ago, in a letter to City Council, I advocated for such median transformations throughout the city. 104th Street has 6 large asphalt medians, making not a paltry area of blacktop. Converting these medians would have a variety of benefits: habitat for native plants, habitat for native species, especially insects, carbon sequestration in plants and soil. We could mitigate the heat island effect from that asphalt. It would have a traffic calming effect, and it would be beautiful. Many of these ideas are already talked about in the city's climate action plan. Why am I asking that City Council transform these medians? When City Council was discussing its 2022 work plan, I requested that City Council consider the development of a comprehensive climate change Adaptation and Mitigation Plan. While the city has taken some great steps toward reducing climate change, the city has not done much concerning mitigation and adaptation. Humanity has already locked in a moderate amount of global warming, so temperatures in Louisville will continue to rise, at least for the next decades, most likely until the end of the century. To keep our city livable, we need to mitigate the effects of climate change. There are strategies to notably reduce local temperatures. Converting paved surfaces to planted land is one such strategy. Louisville needs to start such a mitigation campaign now so that our children will have a home as livable as the Louisville community currently is. I appreciate that transforming these medians has an associated cost. While I think that the benefits clearly outweigh the costs, I would like to make a few suggestions on this front. First of all, you could defer some other pavement projects. Secondly, as I've suggested before, you could eliminate mowing of non-recreational turf. Finally, I would like to suggest that this could be in part a community project, and the community could donate plants and their time to fill out the medians. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment on items on our agenda or items on the consent agenda, that closes that portion of the meeting and takes us to our consent agenda. Any council members have comments on the consent agenda this evening? Seeing none, is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion of the consent agenda this evening? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. And that takes us to our council informational comments on pertinent items not on the agenda. Any council comments this evening? Just want to remind all of the survivors about breakfast in the park. We're really looking forward to seeing everyone there, so I hope everyone can make it to that. Any other comments from folks? Councilmember Dickinson.
I'll just say the fundraiser on Saturday raised nearly $30,000 for the fire. And we'll talk more about plans for that money, but very exciting.
Thank you, Councilmember Dickinson. Any other updates from folks? All right, seeing none, that takes us to our city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I just say it's a real pleasure to be here in person, and it's going to be bumpy, but we'll figure it out. So good to see everybody. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, everyone. That takes us to our regular business this evening. Our first item on the agenda is a proclamation for Ukraine. And so I will just go ahead and read the proclamation if that suits everyone. It says there's a staff presentation, but if that's all right with everyone, I just want to thank Councilmember Fahey for bringing forward the idea. We have seen such an outpouring of support in the wake of our disaster here in the community from people all around Colorado and even all around the world. People making donations and caring for us and coming to show support and help. And Councilmember Fahey had the idea to try to show some similar support for the people of Ukraine. And so with no further ado, I would like to read our proclamation for Ukraine. I just have to make it big enough to be able to see. Proclamation for Ukraine. Whereas the city of Louisville stands in unwavering solidarity with the people of the sovereign nation of Ukraine as they defend themselves against Russia's unprovoked invasion and war against their democracy and sovereign right to exist as an independent nation. And whereas the city of Louisville stands with other countries, private corporations, religious leaders, states, and cities from around the world in condemning this horrific act of aggression by Russia and demands the immediate cessation of all hostilities. And whereas, in these moments of crisis, the leadership demonstrated by President Zelensky, members of the Ukrainian armed forces, and the citizens of Ukraine are a beacon of resolve and a commitment to the democratic principles and values. And now, therefore, I, Ashley Stolzman, Mayor of the City of Louisville, and City Council do hereby condemn the acts of Russian aggression, support the government and the sovereign nation of Ukraine, and urge the Louisville community to contribute resources and aid to the people of Ukraine. This is the 5th of April, 2022. Any other comments from council members? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of passing our proclamation, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. And that takes us to agenda item A tonight. Thank you to staff for bringing that forward. So agenda item A this evening is our building code updates as proposed previously. We'll have a staff presentation from our planning director, Rob Zuccaro. And we're going to take this item up. We have sort of 1 and 2 because there are 2 ordinance under this. One is regarding energy code and one is regarding fire sprinkling. We'll take both items up at the same time. So when we call for public comments on these, people can come up at either public comment periods to talk about either ordinance that's approved before us or proposed to be approved this evening. And with no further ado on that, I'll turn it over to Director Zakara.
All right, thank you, Mayor
Actually,
Stolzman.
sorry, I apologize. We're back in person. I haven't done these things. So I will actually first open the public hearing. And now I'll turn it over to you.
I was going to say it's just like riding a bike, right? You
Yeah.
just hop right back on, which leads to my question. Do I have to push the lectern button here, or does it automatically switch over? Okay. All right, so I do have a presentation. All right, there we go. Well, it's good to see everybody in person, of course. It is a pleasure to be here before you this evening. So I'm going to be presenting for staff on this item. As you know, back, I think it was March 1st, City Council had a discussion, a continuing discussion on the building code that we've been having for some time, and gave staff direction to come back with this ordinance. And I'm just going to provide a summary of the ordinance. There's 2 before you, and one has to do with the Energy Conservation Code that was adopted last October, and then the other one is related to fire sprinklers. So I'm going to start with the Energy Conservation Code. So again, back in October last year, City Council adopted the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code along with Appendix RC, which is the Net Zero Appendix. So based on direction from City Council last month, we're providing an option that would allow an opt-out for those homeowners who were impacted by the Marshall Fire. So this ordinance adopts the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code. This is the code that we had in effect prior to October of last year. We have a prescriptive element of that code. It's fairly easy to comply with. This allows opt-out, and it's limited to those who lived in the home when the fire occurred. So if they're selling the home or an investor purchases the home, they would not be eligible for the opt-out. So this allows somebody who's coming into the city to rebuild to what we're calling certified financial hardship. So I know there's been a lot of discussion about that in the communities recently, and what we are asking is that somebody simply mark on their building permit application that they have a financial hardship due to an insurance issue. There's no requirement to submit financial information. The city's not going to be verifying financial information. One of the reasons we're doing this is by keeping the 2021 IECC as the base code, that's going to allow people to rebuild to the 2021 code. They can opt in to the base code. This makes them eligible for the Excel rebate. It could also help them with their ordinances and law insurance coverage too. So if they don't have the financial hardship and they choose to build to that higher code, it's still on our books. It is still our base code. So we're hoping that helps with some people's insurance coverage. There are 2 changes to this ordinance since first reading that I want to mention. The first is that I think council had directed us to make this a 3-year program. So basically, somebody could come in with their building permit up to 3 years after the fire and still be eligible for this. The first draft of the ordinance, we had it at 2 years, so we've made a correction, bringing that up to 3 years. So that's changed to December 31st, 2024. That'd be the deadline to apply for your building permit. We have also removed the section that has the opt-out for electrical vehicle charging infrastructure. So this was part of the package of ordinances that came in October of last year, which requires on new home builds that there be an electric charging station in a new residential garage, as well as electric-ready infrastructure for multiple vehicles to be charged. Because that was embedded in our zoning ordinance, that has to go to Planning Commission. So That has to go to Planning Commission April 14th. We had to separate it out just because of the different public hearing requirements for that. So that is a separate agenda item this evening for first reading, which would set us up for a May 3rd hearing on that portion of the code. So on to Ordinance 1826. This is the repeal of residential fire sprinklers or fire suppression systems. So council asked that we bring an ordinance that would repeal that, not just for the fire-affected properties, but for all properties in the city. We originally adopted that requirement in 2014 for new homes, so we've had it for about 8 years. The Louisville Fire Protection District has provided some information in your packet. They are recommending an opt-out similar to the IECC. And I also wanted to note that with removal of the fire sprinkler requirement, some could still choose to build with fire sprinklers, but if adopted as written, nobody would have to. There are some building code requirements for non-sprinkled homes, so we just want to make sure the public's aware of that too. There are some some things you have to do to the fire ratings of your walls and your floor assemblies and some things like that. There's some encroachments that if you're too close to your property line. So there are some things you would need to do if you aren't sprinkled. So with that, I would be happy to try to answer any questions from council.
Any council questions this evening? Seeing none, just to remind everybody, on an ordinance, we take 2 rounds of public comment. So I will take the first round of public comment now on any of the topics that we've discussed this evening. And so we have a few members that have signed up, and just a reminder, if you're in person, it helps if you sign up so I can call people correctly. And so first this evening, we have Mark Cathcart. Good evening, Mark. And then on deck, we have Josh Cooperman. And in the hole, we have Chief Wilson.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Mark Cathcart, Sweet Clover Lane. I do hope you've read my written submissions. I'm not opposing Ordinance 1825 tonight, the net zero requirement, despite this morning's wildfire, the high winds, and yet another damning climate inaction report. I really feel I should, but even I'm prepared to make some compromises. I want to be clear that by passing Ordinance 1826, you are effectively giving a stealth discount to rebuild some of Louisville's biggest homes, many over 4,000 square feet in size. Those concerned with affordability will wonder how they can trust you with safety decisions again, especially if they live in multi-family homes, condos, or apartments that will still be required to have them, as well as all of us that were already mandated to install them. I submitted 3 public information requests to the city. I asked how many homes have been built since the sprinkler requirement. It's 128 single-family detached homes, 300 with townhomes that were mandated to install sprinklers and couldn't be trusted with Louisville's safety. It's a small number. If you pass Ordinance 1826 tonight, it's likely to stay that way, meaning any house fire can be the match for the next wildfire. How many fires was the second question since 2015. The fire district tells me that there have been 2 to 3 per year in detached family homes. It only takes 1. I then asked about sprinkler system complaints between January 2015 and December the 1st, 2021. Although I got over 130 emails, there was only 1 complaint. The owner of 709 Walnut Street was complaining about price gouging by contractors. The city couldn't find a single complaint about the price of sprinklers in the building code. Ultimately, Ordinance 1826, removing sprinklers from single-family homes, is a proposal solving a problem that doesn't exist, and hence a direct subsidy. We don't know what started the Marshall Fire still. Statistically, most fires start in homes. Over a 30-year mortgage, the cost of a residential sprinkler system is about the price of 2 fancy cups of coffee per week. And when you're building 4,000 square feet homes, is it so much to ask? just 100 feet less, a smaller house by 100 foot, could save more than the residential sprinklers. I hope you consider that for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Josh Cooperman?
Hi, Josh Cooperman. I live at 216 Griffith Street. My family did not lose its house in the Marshall Fire, and I would like to say that these comments do not reflect a lack of sympathy for those who did. I do not support this ordinance. I have expressed my opinions before to City Council, and they have not notably changed. The main reason is basically climate change. The building codes that we adopted in October are one of the best ways that the city can combat climate change. And when we have a fire in our city that was fueled by climate change, I simply cannot understand how rolling back those building codes are an appropriate response. Moreover, our community has come together to put together a package of incentives, donations, and tons of advice for people who are rebuilding. I think that should be sufficient, and I think there is more coming, or I hope there is more coming. The previous speaker mentioned a climate report that came out yesterday, but only after some political wrangling delayed its release. I'd like to quote a few things from the press release for that report. The chair of the IPCC says, "We are at a crossroads. The decisions we make now can secure a livable future. We have the tools and know-how required to limit warming." Limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius requires global greenhouse gas emissions to peak before 2025 at the latest and be reduced by 43% by 2030. Even if we do this, it is almost inevitable that we will temporarily exceed this temperature threshold, but could return to below it by the end of the century. So, I've expressed my opinion before. Why did I come back to express it again? Well, I certainly think that repetition helps. I think, the urgency of the climate crisis has become ever more apparent, and it's become ever more certain what the consequences are. I also came back because of the comments that one person made at a previous meeting. This person attempted to argue that we should roll back the codes because rebuilding 550 houses to the older codes would have a negligible effect on the world's global warming. I took offense with that comment. I serve on the Sustainability Board here. Local action is absolutely essential, especially when our political leaders, mostly on the federal level and around the world, can't seem to get it together to do something about climate change.
Thank you for your comments. Chief Wilson?
John Wilson, Louisville Fire Protection District, 895 Vieppe Way. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, City Manager, City staff. The Fire District has shared a lot of information about residential fire sprinklers in your packets, so I'll keep this short. I just want to emphasize a couple more points. Number one, email letters that are in your packet. I counted about 370 letters, but only 30 were pushing the opt-out for the sprinkler system, and out of the 30, 29 were a cut and paste. So it was just like, oh, I'll take this and I'll paste it on my email and send it off. Out of the 377 were supportive of the sprinkler ordinance. And I'd like to repeat a couple times that nowhere in those emails stated that they wanted to repeal this ordinance. They just wanted to have an option to opt out. Item number 2, this will affect all single-family residents. But I want to make sure that you realize that this affects all duplexes, fourplexes, sixplexes, townhomes. So I just hope that your neighbors are good neighbors and they don't catch their house on fire or their duplex on fire if we don't have this sprinkler system. I'm going to skip over the saving of the money because Rob mentioned about that if we repeal the ordinance, then we have to bring up the codes, more drywall and so on. So the cost is going to wash out a little bit there. The last item is, who does this really affect? This really affects the person that either owns a home currently and has a lot of money, or is buying a house in Louisville and wants to tear it to the ground and rebuild it. Those people have the money to spend $6,000 to $12,000 extra to put sprinklers in, just like they were going to put your 2021 electric codes in too. So thank you very much. This is for our safety, for your safety, our safety. Please don't repeal the residential fire sprinklers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Next, we have Larry Donner.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Hi, Larry.
Hi. My name is Larry Donner. I lived at 1020 Willow Place, Louisville, Colorado. I'd written counsel with concerns about how to opt out of the requirements to build to the 2021 codes with the appendix. And I want to first thank Councilor Brown for responding to my email to assuage my concerns, and I would like to thank Director Zaccaro for his clarification tonight. And with that, I just urge Council to support Ordinance 1825. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Next, we have Don.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
My name is Don Clay. I live at 557 Augusta Lane, Louisville, Colorado, and I would like to point out that the Marshall Fire has not yet been linked to climate change, so a comment like that is not a factual comment. And I would like to have listed the changes that were made to the net zero ordinance change, so that based from what was sent to the company, to the staff, city staff, to be written up. That's all I have.
Thank you. Next, we have Christian Dino.
Can everyone hear me?
We can. Hi, Christian.
Hi. I would just like to thank Council for considering this opt-out option and for the support that it's received in past meetings. I think this goes a long way towards helping a lot of folks that are underinsured and may not be able to rebuild without it. And I would just urge everyone to continue that support as the vote comes up tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, I come back to Council for any discussion, questions, or comments. Any Council discussion? No questions? All right, that takes us to our final round of public comment on the ordinance. Any comments from the public on either of the ordinances before us this evening? You have a second chance to tell us anything else that you'd like to tell us. Seeing none, that takes us back to council discussion. Any other council discussion on the matter this evening? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
I was waiting for everybody else to speak, but nobody's raising their hand, so I'll go. With regard to Ordinance 1825, this is, to me, it's a continued discussion that we had earlier in the winter, and then when we gave direction to staff to come back with an ordinance. I didn't envision that staff would come back with what they came back with, but I appreciate that it really provides, I think, a very clear dual path. So thank you for the staff and the city attorney that worked on that, because there's two pieces that are really important to me. If you take a look at the public comment that we got during our meetings, you take a look at the emails we got, and you look at the survey information that we have, a lot of people have declared they're underinsured. And so we want to build this community back, and we want to do everything we can and not be an impediment to doing that. And so one of the ideas was, okay, so if we step back to the 2018 code, then most people felt like even being underinsured, that they could build back. And so, you know, given that, I appreciate the fact that we have this dual path, one being a simple checkbox on the application for the building permit, and I believe that's what the director was suggesting, just declaring I need to do this in order to be able to rebuild. And I think that's the message, and that was the intention. I think that helps those people who are underinsured, or at least the intention is to help those people who are underinsured. But we also heard from people who said the 2021 code is something that they want to build to, and they want to be able to exercise their ordinance and law provision of their insurance. And, you know, I fully support that too. And that's what I like about what we have in front of us. So I'm looking forward to supporting this. I will say, and I guess I'd like to hear the comments from my colleagues, the word certified or me reminds me when I signed my 1040 tax form that something could be audited, could be, you know, interrogated, whatever. We're not really looking for that. I think what the director mentioned was really a declaration of people that need to be able to do this. And, you know, and I hope that's an important message to me that the community hears. So with that, I'm ready to support Ordinance 1825. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And if council members could just for the sake, I mean, we don't have to do it this way, but if people would make their comments on both ordinances at the same time, I think it would expedite the conversation.
I will continue. With respect to 1826, and thank you, Chief, for being here and making your comments, and I really appreciate all the information that was in the packet. I'm sure that came from the fire district. You know, to me, this is a continuing theme of how do we help people rebuild, and I'm really not set on how we do this at this point in time. I think at a minimum, I would like to see us provide an opt-out for those people who feel like that they need to be able to find ways to rebuild. But I want to keep the code in the long term for all new construction. So that's where I'm at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. Councilmember Fahey.
I would agree with just about everything that Mayor Pro Tem Maloney just said. I think it's very important to give people the option to do what they think is best for them. But I want to emphasize the number of incentives that we're providing and that Excel is providing and that other people are providing to cover these costs. So I would vote essentially to approve 1825, to give 1826 the option for opting out, but keep the requirement for sprinkler systems in place for the rest of the city. I just really want to emphasize the importance of both of these ordinances for the safety, for the welfare of the residents. We're not trying to impose any hardships on anyone. We're trying to save you. And so I would like to keep them in place, but with the opt-out option, knowing that we have many, many incentives that will help you cover the cost.
Thank you, Councilmember Fahey. I'll just add my voice to the conversation while I'm waiting to see other hands pop up. So I think we had a very robust conversation when we were setting the policy direction on what staff would bring back, and I appreciate staff's responsiveness to the direction that was given. So the first piece is Ordinance 1825, which is talking about rolling back the energy conservation code on these homes that were destroyed in the fire, and the second piece is around fire sprinkling. And I really look at these as a complementary set of conversation. When we got emails from residents, many people haven't read the building code. I may be the only person on council who's actually sat and read the actual code that we've adopted. But nonetheless, when people would send in comments about the code, there was a lot of confusion in the comments and mixing of terms. And so I spoke with hundreds of families that lost their homes, and I read every email that was sent in. We've been getting so many emails, I wasn't able to respond to everyone, but I read everyone. And the underlying theme was an issue around cost. And very few people had quotes from actual builders, but I did get a handful of them from people. And their concerns that they were listing these very high numbers for what they were calling the net zero codes, but when you would look in the actual quote, the things that were listed had nothing to do with the energy code. It was fire sprinkling, fire suppression. It was structural changes and size changes to buildings to accommodate fire suppression, and a number of other things. And so when I was listening to people's concerns about cost, it seems that the biggest factor in that conversation is fire suppression. And over time, I have had many comments from people that are concerned about the cost of fire suppression. When we adopted it back in 2014, the Building Code Board of Appeals wasn't in favor of adopting it. The fire district was. There was conflict there, and it has always been one of those decisions. It's a very hard decision. Like, we have smoke detectors that save lives. Do they save lives to the same extent as fire sprinklers? No. And so it's a cost-benefit question, and none of it is 100% foolproof. So that it was a split vote when it was approved. When the fire district talked about whether there would be an opt-out, they had a split vote. This is a really tough conversation around fire suppression. And from my perspective, on the fire suppression side, if it doesn't make sense to put it in these 550 plus homes, then it doesn't make sense to require people to do it. And it's the same thing with the energy code, frankly. Like, building codes are in place as minimum standards for life safety and health, and they should be applied equally. And so I spoke clearly last time that I don't feel that Ordinance 1825 accomplishes what it's purported to set out to do. There has been commenting online that's not supported by any evidence or documentation about costs associated with it, that are just inaccurate and have created significant concern from families. And I understand why they're concerned, because they're trying to get back home. But it doesn't reduce costs to the level that it's been claimed to do. On the other hand, the fire sprinkler requirement seems to have firmer figures. People also inflated those when they sent us emails, and we've had some really good figures from builders here in town. But I truly believe Ordinance 1826 offers much more financial relief than Ordinance 1825. And there are several people that have been against taking climate action and have been against the energy codes from the onset, and they have unfortunately used this tragic opportunity to advance their political cause. So I will be voting against Ordinance 1825 this evening because it doesn't do what we've set out to do, which is to help families rebuild at a lower cost. And I will be voting in favor of Ordinance 1826, which does in fact help families save money on their rebuild. Any other comments from council members? Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the comments from the folks in person here as well as online tonight. I appreciate the work that the staff did to put together this particular ordinance. I feel that the staff took the council's direction from our previous meeting well, executed that well. I believe that this particular ordinance helps people to not only for us to maintain the 2021 codes for most folks, but it also helps to for fire victims to opt out when there is a clear example of underinsurance. It helps folks to maximize their insurance coverage as well. So for the folks who do have sufficient ordinance and law or other coverage, it will allow them to keep that coverage in place so that they can rebuild to 2021. And that's important to me. And I have, it's very important to me that the provisions remain the way that they are and have been drafted by staff so that we can protect people who are underinsured as well as appropriately insured. So I'll be voting in favor of Ordinance 1825 this evening because I think it's the right path for the city at this particular moment. I'll also be voting in favor of 1826. I think the mayor's comments about 1826 and the fire suppression are well taken, and that I appreciate those comments, and as I have stated previously, I support that as an additional relief for folks who are trying to rebuild their homes. So I just want to say as a related comment that I have appreciated the debate that we have had as a community about these energy codes, but I would also hope that it's a lesson to all of us that listening to rumors, spending too much time on Facebook or other social media, and not having appropriate sourcing of information is dangerous. Over the weekend, again, there were rumors about my involvement in the writing of this code, I should say of this ordinance. I want to make it clear that there was no 11th hour effort to slip things in unbeknownst to the public. Everything we do in front of this on this dais is public, and the language that we are voting on tonight was noticed more than 3 weeks ago because of or thereabouts in first reading, and it has not changed. Folks on this dais who were implicated in that same supposed conspiracy had nothing to do with ordinance, and as a matter of fact, don't support the ordinance. So let's all take a moment, take a step back, and think about the level of trust that we're putting in our neighbors and the people that are sitting on this dais. We are your friends and neighbors as well, and I get no pleasure in thinking about people who may be priced out of Louisville, who may not be able to rebuild their homes. I'm sick and tired of motivations of this council, myself included, being called into question over the types of ordinances that we're putting in place, as if we somehow would benefit from that. I want my neighbors and my friends to be able to rebuild. And so I hope that we can continue to have a conversation and can continue to build trust amongst each other, because that's what Louisville is about, and it's always been about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Councilmember Dickinson?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, I think it's been really interesting to see the level of engagement. In one sense, it's fantastic just how many people have become incredibly engaged in the process, but it's a tough thing to be engaged in, right? And these are complicated things that we're going through, and we're going through a lot of them also with trauma. So you have a lot of people who are traumatized and engaged for the first time, and so yeah, I think we all. I appreciate what you said, Councilmember Brown. We all need to learn lessons from each one of these experiences and try to do better each time with the way we talk to each other and the way we have these conversations and the way we try to come to a common solution. On 1825, I'll be voting for this ordinance as it's written, and I think the intention, I think everyone's pretty much spoken to it well enough, but the intention of the checkbox, if you will, is to try to, thread that needle and allow people to opt out when they need to in order to be able to afford to stay in our community, and let others not do that. And hopefully many, many, many people will not do that and build to the highest code that we're so excited about. That is the law of the land right now. And so, and in doing so, we'll get their insurance coverage. It's not perfect. We aren't your insurance company. We can't guarantee all this goes exactly as we want it to go. But that's the intention, right? The intention is to give flexibility. The intention is to not create a bunch more paperwork. I know some of the people I talked to, we talked about the rebate for Excel and how great it is. And basically this wonderful woman said to me, like, okay, you fill out the paperwork. I'm done. Like, I'm so done. I'm so exhausted. I can't do another step. And even though it's like free money, it's like I don't even want to go through that process. So I think there's a little bit of fear there too, that we're going to put a process in front of them that's going to make it daunting and uncertain, and they might not get it. So I think we've said enough that the intention is to try to thread that needle, but it is not to run everybody through some long process of proving that they need to opt out. So I'm in support of it as written and don't need any changes to it. As far as the fire code, I have been, it's been a really tough one for me. I'm a little conflicted. I think I'd like to hear a little bit more. Obviously, we have a couple people who haven't talked. But I don't see us having a lot of, single-family detached homes built in Louisville outside of the recovery moment, outside of these, homes being rebuilt. I don't see us having big new neighborhoods in our community. We're pretty well built out. So the reason I bring that up is if we're going to vote for it, as a couple people have said, or we might appreciate or consider an opt-out for the fire victims, it feels like most of the homes that get rebuilt are not going to have the sprinklers either way. Now, again, anyone can put a sprinkler in their house as they're building. No one, that's not, just because it's not part of the code doesn't mean you can't do that, right? So anyone who wants that personal increased protection, you can have a fire extinguisher in every room. You can have smoke alarms in every room. You can have a sprinkler system throughout your entire house. No one is stopping anyone from protecting their things. But I think the reason this is a little more controversial is because we're asking people in some ways to protect, when it's mandated, we're asking you to protect your neighbors. We're asking you to protect the street across, or the house across the street. And the question is, do we need to? And we decided in 2014, obviously I wasn't on the dais, we decided in 2014 that we do need to do this. We need to mandate it so that when you're building a home, you're protecting me. And so I'm just a little conflicted. I mean, if that's the stance, then it should, if it's a safety concern, then it feels like it's something that we should just require. Or if it isn't 100% necessary, then we just shouldn't require it at all. But having an opt-out just for the fire victims, I get it from a financial perspective, and I really appreciate the mayor's comments on that this might have as big, if not bigger, financial impact for the people rebuilding. But then wouldn't you favor just the opt-out? Then it seems like, and you can respond if you want, but if it really is about saving the money, then are you actually maybe in agreement with them that we should have an opt-out for the fire victims, or do you kind of hold that it should just be universal? And so I will just be honest that I'm kind of excited about voting in the majority, because I think I'm pretty persuadable on this one, and I'd love it to be 7-0, but I'm gonna have a really hard time if it's 3-3 and I have to vote last, because I can really see both ways here. I think I'm really in the middle of this one. I don't have a strong opinion. I really feel like I get, we got a wonderful email today from a resident. I get it. And if keeping sprinklers saves one life, that's pretty powerful, right? And that's hard to know. So that's the trouble, right? We could reduce all of our speed limits by 10 miles an hour across the city, and that would also maybe save a life. So there are lots of things that we can do, and is this the right one? So I'm a little conflicted on this one. I would still like to hear more comments before I make my final decision.
Council members have any other comments this evening? Councilmember Most.
Yeah, I'd like to just say that we'll start with the fire suppression system. I agree with Mayor Stolzman on this, and I think I'm going to vote to rescind that code. I think Mayor Stolzman made a good case, and that's where I stand on that. As far as the 2021 codes, I'm very uncomfortable with where we are on this vote, and part of the reason I'm uncomfortable is because at the meeting where we discussed making this recommendation to staff, one of the council members commented that people were traumatized, they wanted certainty, people were scared, people were overwhelmed, and that's all completely true and totally understandable, and I don't think there's anybody here who would try to, in any way, diminish the experience that people had in losing their homes. It's horrible. However, I don't think that fear and uncertainty and trauma, I think someone used the word anxiety, is the foundation for making good public policy. I think that it's important that we used facts and data. And so I'm very uncomfortable because we have a number of, I think, very reliable estimates. And it's true we don't know exactly until people start getting actual estimates on their home builds. And I think that's why we shouldn't be doing this, because we don't have certainty. And I want to read something from an email that a resident sent to us. And this was shortly, I believe, after that meeting. And they said, the emotions are real, and people are scared, and facts and logic don't necessarily matter. But those are our emotions and our fears. We all need you, all of you, meaning the city council, to be the facts and the logic and reason for us. The vast majority of you didn't lose a home. Be our backbone, be our strength. That's how you should be supporting us, and that's what leadership looks like, saving us from really bad decisions, even if it might not look like it at the time. I think we have a responsibility as city council members to think about the long-term health, safety, and well-being of our community. And for me, when we're talking about building 500-plus structures that are going to be here for 100-plus years, that's the long-term proposition. And to try to set policy when we don't have exact numbers, but we certainly have a lot of data that, as Mayor Stolzman indicated, is totally contradictory to rumors and speculation that was running around the internet. As Councilmember Brown said, the internet's a really bad place to get your information from. So I'm just uncomfortable going forward with this at this point, because I think that we're taking a step backwards on climate change. And as one of our community members said earlier, the way that we're going to solve climate change is on a municipal level. And I know people have said, well, it's just 500 homes, it's just one community. It's 500 homes plus homes, 560 homes in one community, times 1 million decisions like this that are made every single day across the country and the world. And I feel a profound obligation. I'm 60 years old, I'm the end of the baby boom. I've watched baby boomers move through their lives and kind of swallow everything in front of them. And if you talk to folks in their, 30s and 40s and even, early 50s, they'll say that, there has been a huge consumption issue. And so I feel like we have a special obligation to think about the future. And I understand a lot of people are in retirement. They're thinking about the sunset years in their lives. They had plans to be in their homes. And we've seen it in public comments, in editorials, or letters to the editor in the newspaper, that they're not going to be here, right? They're not going to be here in 15 or 20 years. They're not going to see the benefits of the IECC 2021 codes. And I think that's incredibly sad. I think that's, honestly, I think that's a very, very sad perspective to take on life. I had a daughter late in life. She's 16 years old. I feel a profound sense of responsibility to clean up some of the mess that my generation has made. And to take this action now, to roll back a really progressive view on how to move forward in an incredibly environmental efficient way, to me, is just really unfortunate. And I also hope that the people in this community who have been making really strong arguments that this was an untenable financial burden. And that's what we've heard over and over again, that this was going to be the difference between people being able to rebuild and not being able to rebuild. And that there was a whole conversation, many communications about even requiring people to check a box that says they have a financial burden is somehow too much and shameful. I hope that these people, these same people, when we start talking about things in this community like food insecurity and affordable housing and mental health services, will keep that in mind. Because there are people in our community who face trauma every single day. Not the trauma that you suffered losing your home, which is a special kind of, horrific experience, but there are people who are one illness away from losing their homes. They're one job loss away from losing their homes. They are desperate to get into the housing market in this community and want to know why we're not doing anything on affordable housing. And I just hope that the compassion that people are asking for as they recover from this trauma sheds some insight, provides some insight, I should say, when we start dealing as a community with a lot of those other issues, because we have people who are dealing with trauma every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Mose. Councilmember Lay.
Thanks. We're here. This is the decision that we've been working on for so long. And I know that plenty of people who are paying attention tonight think that perhaps we've taken too long. And I don't know whether that's true or not. This process of democracy is messy. And I am, for one, kind of happy about that, because I think it is, as messy as it is, it's important for people to be able to express themselves and to make sure that those of us who are representing their views to know what they're thinking. I think at the same time, there's been a lot of rancor. I think there's no question about that, and I appreciate Councilmember Brown's earlier comment, because I was disappointed to see people assuming ill intent and nefarious motives, and that's disappointing. It's understandable, but it's disappointing, because I think what I understand from this process is that at least 1825, and I'll get to this in just a minute, but the hardship piece of it was something that the staff and the city attorney worked very hard on to reflect the conversation that we had had at our March 1st meeting to give direction. It wasn't exactly what I had anticipated as language, but it's been out there. And I think that was done in good faith. And I think that the people on council, in my view, all 7 of us, people, maybe I'll say 6, and then you can judge for yourself about me. But I think care very deeply about this community, have worked very hard on this issue, have talked with many people, have had some really difficult conversations with many people, and have searched themselves for the best decisions that they're capable of. And I think in stepping back from all of that, I'm proud for the discussion that we've had. It is messy. There are parts of it that I wish were a little smoother, and I wish that people could give one another a little bit more benefit of a doubt than sometimes they do. And that's probably true for any one of us on any given occasion. There are times when we probably need to give a little grace to other people. And we've been through 2 years of pandemic. I'm seeing people I haven't seen in 2 years. I and I'm sitting at a dais and I am seeing people I haven't seen on the dais for 2 years. It's been a hard couple of years, and for everybody in different ways. But for those of you who went through the fire and lost your homes and suffered the trauma yourselves, your families, I can't even begin to appreciate that. I mean, I can't begin to understand it. I can respect very deeply the level of graciousness that you've shown me and many others. Most of the people who have lost their homes have shown that kind of grace and patience, and I appreciate that so much because I think it's helped us to wrestle with a very difficult issue. And the trauma is real. I don't think there's anybody on the dais or anywhere else that doesn't appreciate that that is a daily battle. And it's a daily battle to deal with the uncertainty and with the wind. I didn't lose my house, but last night I felt that anxiety of hearing that wind. And I know there are plenty of people who feel that too. So that's an ongoing thing, and I really appreciate that. I think that's all important, and this process of coming to these conclusions is pretty important. And I appreciate the public for hanging in there with us. I appreciate other council members hanging in with one another on this. When I came into this decision on 1825 in particular, I had a couple of goals. One is to provide relief to every person who'd lost their home or had significant damage to their home, and especially to those who were underinsured. And we learned over and over again last time, as I think the findings in this ordinance suggest, that that is a very, very critical reason why we were supporting the evidence before us kind of supported. And I think the problem that we came up against over and over again is that people were uncertain also about how much all of this was going to cost. And so to provide that certainty, I think creating the opt-out is a good thing. I do understand that there are people who have ordinance and law coverage that we give a fighting chance to get those insurance payments that they've worked for and have paid for if we include this checkbox. And I'm willing to support that. I don't especially like the language about certifying. I wish we could say something like a test or something like that. But I understand that that is an important, that the language there is very narrow. And I want to focus just for a second on that, because that is something that I know we've had very, very strong feelings expressed by the public about this provision. Section, what is it, 1518.010B4, I guess. Folks aren't certifying that they're in economically or otherwise dire straits, though it's clear that many are. They're only having to check a box indicating that they're underinsured. And that's what we heard over and over and over again. And we hope that the way that that occurs is it's going to be a fairly simple process to secure the opt-out, but that allows those people who have the coverage to be able to get it. It will make our ordinance a little bit stronger, and it doesn't say anything more than as a matter of your entire insurance situation that you're underinsured. Not that you're underinsured in a particular area, just that you are underinsured generally. So for that reason, I think it provides the relief that traumatized families need. I think it's a good thing that way. I think it provides some certainty of being able to build to the 2018 code if these, as Councilmember Fahey mentioned, there are going to be incentives. I hope that there will be much more than that, but we can't promise all of that stuff right now. We just can't. And it's an awful lot better for us to show you than tell you. And my work as a trial lawyer has taught me that it's much better to to show than tell. And I want to say, I guess, finally putting that choice in the hands of the people who are having to make these decisions about whether to stay, and I hope they will, which builders to use or which builder to use, and how to use that person to trust their interactions in terms of the costs that they're having to deal with, hoping that they will, in fact, build to the higher standard. And so I'm going to support 1825. On 1826, we dealt with that at the very end last time. I think it's fair to say that we were exhausted. We didn't really get a very good chance to talk about that one. I have received materials that Chief Wilson has provided, and he's provided some additional information. And I, like Councilman Dickinson, am somewhat torn on this one. I understand that at some level it would be, if it's a safety matter, it ought to be equally applicable to everybody. But I think also I'm balancing that against cost and that sort of aggregate cost. And it's not I don't know that it's going to be an easy, simple situation. But what I think is that I agree with Mayor Pro Tem. I think that I would prefer to do an opt-out as opposed to eliminating it completely. I think that the sprinklers do save lives. They give people a little bit more time to get out of the house, and I don't think they are. I think we can justify the balancing that at least I'm suggesting because they're not as perhaps critical as many of the other fire regulations that we have are. But this one, I think I want to at least retain and give people the chance to do that and to opt out if they're not wanting to do it and choosing against it. So, thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank my colleagues for their comments. I don't look at any of these issues as being black and white. And, as Councilor Fahey was mentioning, as many people get deeper into this and working with their architects and their builders, they will better understand what challenges they face that they don't necessarily know today. But, with Director Watson over there, he'll like this story. So there was somebody in the 13th tee the other day and yelled at me at my house and said, I thank you for, putting on the agenda the ordinance to consider opting out for the energy code. But just to let you know, I met with my builder, and now I'm going to be building to the 21 code because it fits within my budget. So, You know, that's a theme that I brought up last time, and I believe and I trust that people will do that because if you take a look at citizen surveys, this community strongly supports environmental issues and sustainability. And so I think people will, for the most part, if they have the means, they will build to the code. And as Councilor Fahey mentioned, there are a lot of incentives. And as people understand the costs and the incentives, I think we're going to, for the most part, get where we want to get. But what this gives us while we're passing tonight is some certainty that people have a parameter they can work within. And once they understand the challenges rebuilding. I had somebody that today called me and said that their builder is looking at $250 a square foot. Of course, who knows what lumber is next month, but that's a lot lower than we've heard. And so that's going to incent them to want to build to the code as well. So with that, I'm going to make a motion to approve Ordinance 1825, Series 2022.
Is there a second? Was that Councilmember Lay? Thank you. Any discussion of the motion? Councilmember Brown.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that with that motion, we know that we've included the second reading amendments that staff has included.
Yes, it's for the motion in the packet, for the ordinance in the form in the packet.
As long as the staff's second reading amendments are included, that's great. Thank you very much.
All right. And Councilmember Lay wanted to speak to the motion?
Yes. Just one more reason for supporting the motion, Mayor. I think that in passing this, all of us can declare victory. And I mean by that, not only for the people who have lost their homes and giving them relief, but I think that building as many homes as will be built under the 2018 code, with many of them, I think, going to go up, I think is it's going to be a wonderful gift to sustainability in our area. And I think we can be very proud of that, irrespective of what we do. Thanks.
I just want to take a moment. So I'm hesitant to close the public hearing. Once I close the public hearing, we won't introduce any new material. So do people need any additional discussion on the second ordinance? I want to first take up voting on this ordinance, but I need to close the public hearing to do that. So if people have any other debate or discussion they need to have on the second ordinance, I would like to hear it now, just so that I can close the public hearing. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And I'll ask, there's a motion on the floor for Ordinance 1825, Series 2022. Is there any further discussion of the motion? Seeing none, City Clerk Muse, could we please have a roll call vote on the motion?
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Mayor Stolzman?
No.
Councilmember Most? No.
Thank you, everyone. I move we approve Ordinance 1826, Series 2022. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion of the motion? Councilmember Fahey.
Can I do a substitute motion?
Yes, you can.
To move that we make this an opt-in or opt-out for the fire victims?
Would you propose some specific language, please, Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Right. So the ordinance as presented to the City Council is simply just to delete the section in the code having to do with the residential fire systems. And there's no findings in this ordinance that this is related to the Marshall Fire or the reasons. And we separated them because the council's discussion at the last meeting was, you know, the net zero and the 2018 code, that's related to helping people rebuild. The fire sprinkler systems was for everyone. So really we would need to do some pretty substantial second reading amendments. And so my recommendation would be, if the majority of the council is in favor of using the same sort of opt-out related to assisting those to rebuild from the Marshall Fire, that you continue this to your next meeting for action so that we can do that for you and present it to you in a form that really reaches the policy goal. Because that would really suggest that there's been a policy shift in the reason for adopting the ordinance.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney may offer.
I'd like to ask the city attorney a question.
Sure.
Would it be appropriate that we would take a vote on this particular ordinance as written and then make a determination? Because if this passes, then it passes. But if it does not pass, then we could consider something else.
That's certainly fine. It's the prerogative of the council to make a substitute motion, though. And so I want to allow Councilmember Fahey to do that, but it may be better to make a motion to bring it back. And then, you know, if there's no second, then we could vote on the primary motion. Councilmember Fahey?
No, I'll wait and see what the vote is.
Okay. Any other discussion on this one this evening? All right, seeing none. City Clerk Muth, could we have a roll call vote on the motion?
Councilmember Most?
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey?
No.
Councilmember Dickinson?
No.
Mayor Stolzman?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. The motion carries. Our next order of business this evening is ordinance number 1827, series 2022, an ordinance amending the city's sales and use tax concerning economic nexus and marketplace facilitators. This is our second reading, and it was advertised in the Daily Camera on the 20th of March, 2022. I will open the public hearing, and I'll ask if we have a brief staff presentation from our excellent finance director, Kevin Watson.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. I won't reiterate all the information that we put into the packet, but just to summarize, last year in July in 2021, the City Council authorized the execution of an agreement for the city's finance department to access the Colorado Department of Revenue sales and use tax software. Staff has been working with the state representatives on the implementation of the GIS state certified sourcing database and the portal for tax return filing and payment processing. The next step in this implementation will be to pass the ordinance in front of you tonight, Ordinance 1827. The passage of this ordinance will officially require, not just encourage, the collection and remittance of sales tax by remote sellers, online retailers that meet the definition of the economic nexus. So this is a big important point regarding the implementation of collecting sales tax from online retailers. And we're recommending the approval of the ordinance on second reading, and I'll be happy to try and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Director Watson. I just want to thank you for all your work on this. It was a brief presentation this evening, and it may not seem like much, but if folks look in the packet, the Finance Department has been working tirelessly on this economic nexus issue, from implementing the state software, working with the state, really understanding what it means to collect online sales tax. And so Finance really is the unsung hero of the day on all of this. It's a tremendous amount of work, and it's how we have the resources to be able to do all the things and offer all the services that we do. Our Finance Department has worked very carefully and diligently over the years to read every piece of material, often leading the way with CML and others in the state to understand how to do all of this. So I think we owe just a great debt of gratitude to Director Watson and all the people that work for you. So thank you so much for everything on this.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I also just want to point out that the Finance Committee's been working on this really hard, and I'll just give an opportunity to Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, the chair of the Finance Committee, to make any comments if he would want to.
What's it been, 3 years, something like that? You know, this is something that I think is important for the economic sustainability of the city, and what's mentioned in the report is being able to collect, you know, internet-based sales, taxes, and so forth. We feel that there can be some gains for the city. So anyway, I appreciate what Director Watson and the staff has done, and previous staff who was deeply involved in this. So thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. And so we'll go to the members of the public on this evening. Any members of the public care to comment on this agenda topic tonight? Seeing none, that takes us back to any other council discussion on this topic this evening. Seeing none, that takes us, there's another round of public.
Oh.
Councilmember Fahey.
Sorry, I just have one question. In the fiscal impact section of the report in the packet, it says that this would probably increase the total amount of sales tax collected from remote sellers, but it might be offset by the loss of sales and use tax license fees. Why would that be? I'm not clear on that.
How much will it be offset? Is that what you're asking?
Right, and why would it be offset?
Oh, why would it be offset? Okay. The, as you recall, in the 2018 Supreme Court decision, South Dakota versus Wayfair, that allows us to collect tax from online retailers. However, the Supreme Court says you cannot impose an undue burden to online businesses. One of the things defined as an undue burden is the requirement to license. So once we implement this, all license for people like Wayfair and Amazon, we can't really enforce that. So they will be paying the state, and then the state will be paying us. There will be no licensing that we can require for those online retailers. However, we are considering the possibility of doing a business license rather than a sales and use tax license. So that's something that the Finance Committee will be talking about in the future. So the total fiscal impact right now is really not known. However, I am confident in talking to a lot of the cities that have implemented this that we will be collecting more sales tax from the online retailers. But the question of how much, I just don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Just for clarification, the licensing he's talking about is the retailers have to license with the city of Louisville. So when Council Brown buys fish hooks from someplace in Rhode Island, they may not be licensed in Louisville, but with this, we're expecting they'll be licensed with the state of Colorado.
I only support local retailers.
Okay. So. So I just wanted to make that clarification because this ensures that a wider net around retailers throughout the country that have to collect sales taxes.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. Any other members of the public care to comment on this agenda topic? This is the second round of public comment and final round of public comment on this ordinance. Seeing none on this topic, that takes us back to council discussion. Any further council discussion on the ordinance this evening? Or motions, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 1827, series 2022.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Dickinson. Any further discussion of the motion? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And I'll ask City Clerk Muth for a roll call vote on the motion.
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Most?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Stolzman?
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Next on our agenda tonight is resolution number 23, series 2022, a resolution setting certain water, wastewater, stormwater, and other fees, rates, and charges for the city of Louisville, Colorado. Our Public Works Director, Kurt Koer, is before us this evening to tell us a little bit about this topic.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Kurt Koer, Public Works Director. Before you is consideration of recommendations from staff and the Utility Committee, now the Finance Committee, for rate increases for wastewater in the amount of 3% and stormwater in the amount of 5%, and no rate increase for water at 0%. The increases before you, we've got a lot of detail in the packet that I can dive into, but I'll give you an overview and then you can decide if you want to dive. But these rate increases take in consideration tap fees that accommodate development that could happen within the city in the near future. It takes into account revenue loss from impacts of the fire, and it also takes into account various dynamics in play with our projects that are underway and finishing up. So that overall impact to your utility bill is $1.29. It adds $1 to wastewater and 29 cents to stormwater. With that, I'll open up questions, or you can request to do a deeper dive if you'd like.
Thank you. First, we'll turn it over to members of the public to comment on this agenda topic tonight. Any members of the public care to comment on our utility rates? First in the queue, we have Cynthia Korn Musselwhite.
Hello, Council. Thank you for your service to our beautiful community. When we look at rate increases, I'm just curious how the water budget works. And so do they look to be net positive? How does that work in terms of evaluating when a rate increase goes in? Are you trying to come out break even? Why? What's precipitating the increase? Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comments, we'll turn it back over to staff for just a little more explanation to the public. So just so everyone knows, we may not have very much discussion from the council on this because this has been through our utility committee and we've sat through other presentations directly related to this topic. Maybe council members will have many questions. I'm not trying to squash discussion if people have them, but if you could just expand a little bit on how our process works, and then maybe even the finance director weigh in on how the enterprise works here in our city. Director Coer?
Sure, all good questions. So the utility undertakes a viewpoint or a perspective of smoothing versus just-in-time rate increases. So when we make a recommended rate increase, that is over a 5 to 10 year look ahead that we are using to develop these rates and also take into account the impacts of today's dynamics. So the 3% in wastewater is a function of project load now and into the future, and also a function of debt increase that the city will realize from debt it undertook back in 2015 to build a new wastewater treatment plant. So some of it is a kind of a balloon payment that's happening, and other is projects that are supporting the ongoing treatment of your wastewater. For the stormwater, similar impacts. You have a balloon payments coming up for debt that we are smoothing into. And then again, we have stormwater projects that are taking various cities out of the floodplain or improving management of the floodplain.
Thank you, Director Coer. And just if our finance director wants to add anything in about just the nature of the enterprise. No, he's okay there. And just to add in a little commentary from my side, the staff works really hard to manage costs and make sure that the enterprise sustains itself so we don't transfer any money into the water fund from the general fund or other areas. The fees the customers pay is what covers the cost in those enterprises, so for water, wastewater, or stormwater. And we've seen significant inflation and supply cost increases and staff cost increases, as well as health insurance and other things like that. So our costs have gone up over time, and staff has done a good job managing those costs for the community and presenting lots of information on projects that they can do to lower overall operational cost by implementing capital. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for the explanation. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Coer, can you just refresh, I think the one, and maybe I wasn't listening, but the one line in here that you didn't talk about was the water line, which I notice obviously is a 0% increase. I just can you, we've talked about this at Finance Committee, but maybe just for the full council and for everybody listening at home, how we're able to afford that, or how we're able to do that, I guess.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and bring up a graph here since we're getting into some details, and it'll help explain a little bit.
And it just looks, oh, there we go. So I just want to make sure with City Clerk Muth that the Zoom folks on Zoom can see it as well. Thank you.
Okay. So one of our targets that we try to keep in mind is we have debt. We have to, through our monthly bills and or tap fees, cover a certain amount of payments coming into the city to give our creditors assurance that we can pay that debt. So that is called a debt service coverage. So we established this debt service coverage, and our targets are 1.2 and to 1.3. And I'll just keep it at that high level without going into financial geekiness. On the other targets that we have, we try to keep 90 days cash or 25% of our total O&M costs in our reserves. So those are targets. One of the big things that impacts us is our debt service payments. So on this particular table, especially in water, we have been paying debt for almost the last 22 years, and our debt will be paid off. And so that debt payment was driving some of our debt service coverage. And without requirement for that debt payment, you now have some some room that comes into play that gives you availability. So the debt service coverage is now giving us room. We also have tap fees. Tap fees influence things. And so in 2020, over a period of from 2021 to 2026, we're anticipating $3.8 million in tap fees. Now there's several areas of development under consideration in the city. And so the 2021 estimates for this conversation now have $12.8 million programmed into the rate analysis. So those two things, between paying off debt and estimating that there'll be additional tap fees coming in, provides a scenario where we can go at 0% across the board for many years. A lot of things that are still to be determined. We are updating our utility master plan. So we're trying to, again, look into the future 10 or 20 years. What are our big costs that are going to come into play? We're still trying to understand our damage assessments and impacts on what we will have to do to restore service to each home from the fire and what FEMA will cover. We also have several water conversations in play about selling water that the city isn't able to optimize as much as others could be. There's federal infrastructure bills out there, so there's a lot of these things coming into play where we're kind of at an inflection point on the water side of the utility. If everything goes our way in a good way, it's possible that the utility could continue to stay flat. It's possible that we could lower rates, or perhaps once all this is said and done and we look at the bottom line, it's possible that we go back to some sort of rate increase. But those are your major factors. What I would say after all that rolls up is, I'm just going to go to the last slide. We do work very hard to make sure your utility is efficient. You do have a modern utility. We are doing things at the cutting edge, and we are one of the cheapest utilities in the region. So we do try to stay on top of all this, and these are all great questions.
Thank you, everyone. Any other council discussion? Councilmember Most.
I have a question, and again, please beg my indulgence because I am still coming up to speed on the normal operations of the city because we've been so focused on fire recovery. Just to clarify, the water fund or the water fees, when we talk about water fees, are you talking about just tap fees, or are you talking about the monthly water fees that everybody pays in the city?
A good clarification. So these rates we're discussing tonight are just for the monthly bills.
Okay.
Those bills will see that rate increase.
So we're not going to see any increases in our water, the water component of that bill, but what you're saying is we are going to see ongoing increases in the, I'm just trying to get to the right chart here, in the wastewater and the stormwater, right? And those are annual, we're looking at whatever that was, 4 to 5%. I'm trying to find the right chart over every year over the next.
The only thing we're discussing tonight is this year's rate increase.
Okay.
And Director Coer has put a lot of information in the packet about what the modeling shows for
Right.
a long-term projection.
Right, I'm just trying to understand that. So
what we're voting, I just want to clarify just that what we're voting on tonight is just about this year's rates.
So the question I have is that, and again, please beg my indulgence, water charges are based on usage, right? So most people in the winter usually don't, my family, we never go over the base water charges, but in the summer when we're sprinkling and doing everything else, there's higher water charges. The wastewater and those other fees, stormwater, those are fixed fees. Is that correct?
Correct.
So those are the same fees. So those fees are going up for everybody in the city regardless of usage. The water fees, you're projecting that they're going to stay flat regardless of usage.
At this point in time, yes.
Director Coer, could you talk a little bit about average winter consumption?
Yes, so wastewater is based off the average winter consumption, which is an average of your usage November, December, January, and February. So that is a fixed fee for the year, and then it's recalculated each year.
Oh, so it is, so it's based on individual usage?
Yes.
Okay.
Basically indoor
Okay.
usage.
And stormwater?
Stormwater is based off an area of a parcel.
Okay. Okay.
So I want to just back up so that everyone understands our process quickly. That we work from July to October, November with the utility, now the finance committee, to analyze a lot of different scenarios, test different amounts of money and sensitivity, and then come with this plan today for this year. we will start, so this is for this year, but we will start a new process in July with the Finance Committee reevaluating all the new parameters that come in from what's going on in the world.
Yeah, and again, Mike, one, I'm just trying to learn,
Yeah.
so I understand this, and two, I'm just trying to understand, proportional use and different households. If we're starting to increase fees and we're increasing fees on things that are fixed versus things that are variable, then that tends to hit lower income people, smaller families harder than it does larger homes that use more, that have more use, that have more people, and just trying to understand where we are with that in terms of equity.
Thank you, Councilmember Most, for the questions. Any other council discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Are we at the second council discussion?
So this is a resolution, and so I know this is always confusing, and so I should have done a better job of explaining it. But so on an ordinance by charter, we have 2 rounds of public comment.
Okay.
And since this is a resolution, there's 1 round of public comment.
Thank you.
Any other discussion from council members? Oh, I apologize. This is the first casualty of the hybrid meeting. Maybe not the first. This is one of the casualties of the hybrid meeting. So I had a sign-up card during the public comment period that I did not notice. So while I recognize people have since raised their hands online, they didn't have them up during the public comment period, and we had ended it. But I did have a sign-up card from someone in person that I did not call on during the public comment period. So Josh Cooperman, if you would like to come up and make your comments, please do at this time.
Hi, Josh Cooperman, 216 Griffith Street. I'd like to make a small comment, not directly related to what you're voting on, but actually picking up on something that Councilmember Most was just discussing. So I wanted to, my comment is about the structure of the water charges. So as I understand it, for residential properties, you pay a fixed rate per month. It's like $19 or something, and that covers what I assume are kind of fees to maintain the infrastructure, and then for the first, I think it's 5,000 gallons of usage. And I would like to suggest that we change that structure to be more in line with what we do for commercial. As I understand, for commercial properties, they are charged a fixed fee, which I would guess is for infrastructure, and then they're charged at a rate for how much usage they do, starting from 0. And I think it would be more equitable if we just charge residences in the same way, right? If you use less than that 5,000 gallons, why should you have to pay for the full 5,000 gallons? I don't actually know what my house uses because my wife pays that bill. But, and I also think, looking at the information in the packet, the average household goes above that first amount. But I'm sure there are some households that don't. And I also think maybe there's some households who are near that cutoff, and if we change the rate structure, that would incentivize some water savings. That's all.
Thank you. Any other council discussion? I just have a few comments to add. I really appreciate the engagement from folks who haven't done this before, and there's a lot to take in, and there's a lot of information in our packet, which is posted online. And so there was a utility rate task force back in 2012 and 2013 that really dove into the fairness of all of these different ways of charging. And there are no perfect ways of billing for water or wastewater or stormwater, but there are decisions that get made by the community, and there was a very robust debate around it. On the point of the fixed service charges, so whether we provide 0 gallons of water to everyone in the city, or 1 gallon or hundreds of gallons, there are many, many, many fixed costs of the water system. And so some of those are in that fixed charge. And at the time, in 2012 and 2013, the utility rate task force was really concerned about low-income families and, a grandma or, someone living alone that couldn't afford a bill, that they would have to pay this fixed charge, and then they might not be able to afford any water. Like, they would be paying this $19 charge a month, and then have to pay and not be able to have any more payment for water. So the idea was that there would be some small amount of water included in that. And the number that was ultimately arrived on was roughly an indoor, use charge for a very low consumption of water that most families go over in most of the months. And so it was really to just recognize that some amount of water seemed like the necessary thing to provide to the community. Whether that's right or wrong, or whether the community wants to have a new discussion about that, it's totally appropriate. But I just wanted to let folks know where that kind of came from, so that people would understand that if you had water, you would get an amount of it, so you could drink and you could, shower and do your laundry, and it would still require you to conserve greatly to fall in that first tier. So that's where that came from. There could be more discussion about changing that in the future, but just wanted folks to know where that came from.
I'll just add that we'd never go over.
Good job.
In the winter. But there's only 2 of us, so, which is,
Thank you, Councilmember Moss.
I would like credits for that in the summer, however.
All right, thank you. Is there any other discussion, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Thank you. I want to thank Director Kohr and his staff in working on this. I will note Table 1 on page 1038 of our packet does have lines crossed through those numbers, because those are updated numbers from when the Utility Committee discussed it last fall. And I do want to note that working with the director and the staff, Utility Committee actually made some changes over the last couple of years with the model, the amount of reserve and so forth, and trying to maintain fund balances so they really have that tighter 5 to 10 year perspective, which is very, very important for enterprises. So the Finance/Utility Committee will be looking at again this fall, but I think we have a very sound process right now. It's always up for discussion. But I think there's one of the things alluded to at the very beginning of the report is the smoothing versus just in time. I think we should throw the whole idea of just in time out. It doesn't fit at all for a financial model for an enterprise. The idea that the rates could go up by 20% and then down by and bounce up and down depending on what capitals, projects are being done. And that's something we might want to consider codifying in the financial policies. So with this, I would like to make a motion to approve resolution number 23, Series 2022.
Is there a second? Councilmember Brown, seconds. And comments on the motion, Councilmember Most.
I just want to make one quick motion. I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem Maloney's comments. I'm just sort of thinking about EDI, and just wondering, it sounds like those considerations were looked at, but I think, if we're going to reevaluate this process or the dynamics of the rate change, that it would be worth it for us to make sure that we are thinking about it in those terms relative to the work that was done in the fall from the EDI task force.
Any other discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
It's interesting. The mayor and I have talked about this over the years that I've been on council and utility and so forth. And, do you have a base amount you start with, or is it per gallon? Regardless, there's still this cost, this fixed cost of having the system out there that everybody has to share. And so we can have those discussions, and, we should always have our eye on EDI issues. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And just to help everyone understand why we're going to do a roll call and not a voice vote on this, is when things are related to the budget and finance and setting fees, we still have to have a roll call. And so I will ask City Clerk Muth for a roll call on the motion to approve Resolution 23, Series 2022.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Most?
Yes.
Mayor Stolzman?
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. That takes us to the next order of business. I'm just looking at the time. I think what we ought to do, so that we don't start the next agenda item and then have to break in the middle of it, why don't we take a 10-minute recess and we'll get started back at 8 p.m. Thank you, everyone. We are back from our brief recess, and we'll go ahead and get started on our next agenda item, which is item D this evening, which is to award the Community Park Booster Improvement Contract. I'll turn it over to our city manager, Jeff Durbin, to lead this off.
Thank you, Mayor. Three of us will talk about this tonight. I'll just open up with some thoughts. This was initially planned, the irrigation project for Community Park was planned for 2021. Obviously, that didn't happen, and I can't speak to why, but here we are in 2022, and this is a really important project. Community Park is going to host recovery events, is going to be an emotional support location for the community. I think that's all very important. So we're taking this, thank you, very seriously. We would have liked to have been here in January or February with this project, but obviously we had other priorities earlier in the year. So we're here. We can't change that. And now we've got some challenges, but we want to talk through this. And I think that between the team that's been working on this, I think we have some good solutions and enhancements to this project that I hope you're excited to see. And with that, I'll turn it over to our Public Works Director, Coward.
Thank you, City Manager Durbin. I also want to introduce Dean Johnson, our Park Superintendent, who's here for the conversation. So a few months ago, many months ago, the City Council was talking about boosting parks, similar to how we boosted pavement to get things to a better type of condition, right? So here we are tonight. We're going to talk about some community park booster improvements. This all kind of started with this irrigation main replacement, and that was the basis of this conversation tonight. But also as we received input from the community and we're walking around the park getting ready for the irrigation project, and also listening to the expectations of the council, we identified some other areas that we've added in here for allowances that we'd like to get council approval on so we can improve these different zones in the park. So roughly $600,000 is just for replacing the main line on the irrigation and the valves for that. Those are the pieces that are breaking, and once those are replaced, we'll have a reliable system. We have $150,000 where we're going to add a few zones on the BMX bike track area, which has kind of been a forgotten area of the park, maybe an obsolete area, as back in the day we had BMX tracks, now we have pump tracks, and those are much bigger things with higher expectations. So that area has kind of moved beyond its years, and it's ready to be something else. So we have some costs in here to put in a new zone, put in some sod, and make that area more park-like. We also have some money in here to work on the area of the reuse pond. Parks has already been doing some boosting, and we've taken the fence down around the pond, and now we'd like to create a welcoming area with that spot to put in sod, some crusher fines, some landscape rocks, some trees, and some benches so that it can become a place, a usable area within the park. And then lastly, the dog park fence out there is well beyond its years. Park spends a lot of time fixing it, and it's just kind of a disorderly piece of the park as well. And we have some money in there for that. And then we just have a general contingency on the bottom line for any other unforeseen things. So we wanted to just kind of talk through that with council and see if that's a direction you want to go on top of doing the irrigation main replacement. The money we are identifying to do these improvements is money that council had identified previously for the irrigation main replacement, some parks landscaping, some park improvements. Those numbers all add up to about $850,000. So we're a little over that, and we'll need to do about a $10,000 budget amendment. But in general, to do something nice in a park takes a decent amount of money. And so we're starting to identify that for you so you can see what boosting looks like. We can do some good things in community park, and then perhaps you start to apply that template in other areas of the city. So with that, we just want to introduce what the irrigation project's going to look like, and I'll have Dean kind of go into those details about how our phasing will look and how we'll manage that project through the summer.
Yeah, Dean Johnson, Park Superintendent. First, I just wanted to thank council for supporting this project. Staff is super excited about this. This is something we've been wanting to do for a while. What's really exciting for us is incorporating HDPE pipe into the main line. So this technology is awesome, and Louisville is kind of at the cutting edge of incorporating this in the park system. We did our first project last year at the sports complex. HDPE pipe is practically indestructible. So, and the welds you use on the pipe are actually stronger than the pipe itself. So that's going to solve so many of the issues we've had out there with the irrigation for years. So we're super excited about this. We've recommended a really good team. I'll be on site as the project lead, working with the team daily. We know we have to, there's a lot of events going on. We're moving forward with all the events. We want all the events to happen, and we believe we can pull this off. The place is going to look great. We have other maintenance concerns going on right now that we're addressing, and we really want this park to shine as the gem for Louisville. So I wanted to be available tonight to answer any questions you all may have too. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from council members? I just wonder if Director Coer, you could expand a little bit for people watching around the change the state made in the dog swimming area a few years ago that made it so that we could no longer have recreational use within the pond. Could you just describe that for folks?
Yeah, so the pond out there is a reuse pond. So it is treated wastewater. It is to a standard that's allowable to be reused to water parks, but it's not necessarily something you want direct contact with to swim in. I believe pets maybe were a gray area in the regulation and over the history of the state's management of it, and that's been clarified in recent years. And so that's why that use changed.
Thank you for that clarification. And then just one other topic we've had many times at council is around just the water quality. I know we had several conversations around like a mat of pond scum, for lack of a better term, building up over some of the different ponds in the area. Does any of this project address some of those issues with water quality and pond maintenance?
These components we're talking about do not currently address that, but it's certainly something we can take a look at and put some attention to.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lay.
I guess my question is just whether we've got the bandwidth for this. I think it's a great project, and I really appreciate the presentation and all. I saw that discussion about the high level of oversight, and just want to make sure for our sake and the public that we've got the bandwidth to do it.
We do. We're making it a priority for sure. We're at a point where it's collapsing, so this is really the time to do it. Unfortunately, it didn't live a few more years, but now's really the time to do it, and we are making it a priority, and we do have the bandwidth to get it done.
Councilmember Most?
Yeah, I have a question about this. The zones, you have these 3 different zones in here, the green, the purple, and the blue. And this is, I guess, in relationship to the options for proceeding. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of you guys or not.
No.
This is great.
I'm
It's a
going
perfect
back
time for
to
the question.
Okay, so again, still trying to figure this out. So one of the things, being a patron of the concerts in the park, and just wondering about the zoning and how you're going to handle this. Like, for example, when the concerts go on in the park, the kids are also in the playground and on that water structure. So I'm just wondering, in terms of order of operations, I can't really tell from looking at this map, how you would handle that, because I think that kind of is a component really of the experience that people have when they come to those concerts. I'm just wondering about, if the option 3, which to me looks like probably the best way to go. Have you guys kind of accounted for that, or is that going to have to be kind of cordoned off, or how is that working?
Yeah, so the first step is to approve the contract tonight, and then we'll get that signed and to the contractor tomorrow. And then they're going to order the materials. And then our timelines are dependent on that material delivery. Once we understand the ETA, we'll start to understand how the phase is. The current plan is the blue area, starting at the pump house. We'll come out from the pump house and try to get this inner blue ring done prior to June 1. And as we work, we'll sod behind ourselves, and we'll try to have that area reestablished. We'll continue to work on green and purple areas through the year, but that'll be kind of a moving work zone. It's not like we'll have the whole ring torn up, and it'll be fenced off, and then as we move forward, we'll put sod in behind us. So that'll take a lot of effort to kind of manage that, but that's how we'll reduce the impacts to the park and the events.
Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I agree with Dean. I mean, this is an important park to the community, and I'm really happy it's there. It was a shame the last 2 years, you know, the irrigation system really has failed. And, you know, going with the HDPE, which they use on the golf course, and I'm sure that Mayor knows all about, but you should go watch them when they fuse it together. It's a pretty cool process. But you know, one of the things about this project, I'm struck by the cost. You're talking about almost $900,000. And when I put that into comparison, what we did on the golf course, when we rebuilt that in 2015, it was about $3 million with almost 3,000 sprinkler heads on the golf course. So the message to us is these kind of projects are going to cost a lot of money. So when we start talking about asset management for parks and open space, and those kind of things, we're going to have to be seriously finding a way to be able to fund these in the future. So, but this one, there's no question in my mind we need to do it. I like the phasing you've done. I agree with option 3. The one question I have, and you keep mentioning sodding, and when I look at that west side of it, is that grass sod that's there, will it recover with irrigation, or are we talking about replacing all of that sod?
Go ahead, Dean, but when you say west side, can you clarify a little more? Just the route of the irrigation main?
I'm just talking about the grass on the west side of the park.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, will you just clarify, do you mean on the inside of the sidewalk ring or the outside of the ring or the whole area, just to clarify?
I'm talking about the whole area. That's what I'm trying to understand. Thank you for the clarification.
Where it's gone dormant from non-irrigation in a way?
Yes.
Okay, I'll let that, okay.
No, we won't have to replace all that. The sodding that's going to occur is just the sodding on top of the trenches that's going to go through and the holes that are going to be cut for the new valves. The sod will go dormant in those phases while it's off, but sod's amazing. The plan at most in some of these phases is it may be off for a month, but it's going to come back. It's going to come back fine. But the only sodding that should occur is what is actually disturbed.
Then, Dean, the existing areas will come back as irrigation?
Yes, they will come back. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? We'll go ahead to public comment on this agenda topic. First comment is from Josh Cooperman.
All right. Josh Cooperman, 216 Griffith Street. This is my last comment. I'd like to make one recommendation a small recommendation about this project. And it's rather in line with my comments when we were talking about the consent agenda. I'd like to start off, though, by going back to the IPCC report, not the one that came out yesterday, but the one that came out a few months ago. That was from Working Group 2, and the co-chair had this to say. The scientific evidence is unequivocal. Climate change is a threat to human well-being and the health of the planet. Any further delay in concerted global action will miss a brief and rapidly closing window to secure a livable future. Healthy ecosystems are more resilient to climate change and provide life-critical services such as food and clean water. By restoring degraded ecosystems and effectively and equitably conserving 30 to 50% of Earth's land, freshwater, and ocean habitats, society can benefit from nature's capacity to absorb and store carbon, and we can accelerate progress towards sustainable development. But adequate finance and political support are essential. So my suggestion is there are a few places, not along the trench line, but where the project suggests putting in new sod, in particular replacing the BMX track with sod, and a portion around the irrigation pond with sod. I would like to suggest that instead, we take the opportunity to plant some native plants there instead of grass. That would help to restore some ecosystems, and it would provide some habitat for insects and other animals. It might also help to improve the water quality in the pond, which was discussed briefly before. I think it would also look great, and it would help to sequester a bit more carbon. I also think of this as part of a larger project. I think we should examine our parks and other green areas in the city where we have grass growing, mostly non-native grass, and I think we should try to replace grass that is not used for recreational purposes with native plants. You know, we need to provide more habitat for all kinds of creatures that are rapidly going extinct, and this is a nice way to do it. It'll make the city, I think, look great compared to just having grass, and we won't have to mow that grass and produce more fumes and carbon. That's my suggestion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments on this agenda topic tonight? Our next comment is from Cynthia Corn-Musselwhite.
Thank you all, and I just want to reinforce that I really appreciate the comments from the community member. I'm kind of surprised that this made it out of parks without a and maybe it did with consideration of more natural grasses and natural uses for this sod replacement. Community park could evolve very quickly. So this phase, great. You know, I would encourage you all to approve it. We have a terrific parks team, but we should roadmap very quickly a way to evolve some of the green space in community park to be more natural. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Larry Donner.
Yes, I would. My name is Larry Donner. I lived at 1020 Willow Place. I would just like to make a comment, and that is my house was burned down because of poorly maintained open spaces. The idea that we grow natural grass without either prescription fires, grazing it down, or mowing it is just creating another hazard. If you look at the golf course, and you look at the neighborhood that was taken down there, it was the native areas that carried that fire into the homes. So I would just be cautious. In addition, CSU and the Extension Service ran a program this weekend where they talked about how natural grasses are desirable in some cases, but they do carry fire. And they had photographs of people's front yards that were burned. Anyway, that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments on this one, we'll take it back to council for discussion. Any other council discussion? Councilmember Dickinson.
Thanks. Yeah, I like the suggestions that Mr. Koopman brought up around those, specifically those areas too. You know, it is a nice big grassy field, and that's, I mean, I think it gets used as that a lot and very useful for the concerts and other things, but it does seem that around some of those edges and other places, if there's opportunities for more, you know, not adding turf, it's one thing to go and rip up a bunch of turf that's doing well, but you know, if we're gonna be adding, if there are places where that can be done thoughtfully, I think that'd be fantastic. I could support that. A really minor thing, just from the contract, the contingency 10% is just off by 3,000. So, I don't think it matters much, but you can take a look at that.
Just making sure you read the packet.
Yeah.
Do you want them to take a look at that, or would you like to propose an amendment for tonight?
I'd amend the contingency to 78,400, so that it is actually 10% of the subtotal.
Great. Councilmember.
Yeah, I am thinking back to the lovely presentation we had about pollinators earlier this evening. I wonder if that BMX area, rather than turning that into another place to put more sod, we might think about putting a pollinator garden in there.
So it seems like the last two comments have been online of adding some pollinators. So could we give staff some discretion to look at so the scope of the budget has some contingency in it, and it has some room in it. So there are two areas that sort of have been identified in the discussion for potential pollinators. One would be around the pond area, and one would be in the BMX area. The reason I don't suggest we just do it from here is there are a lot of issues with maintenance and watering and things like that we might not think of while we're sitting here tonight, but if we give them some discretion to look at pollinator gardens in those areas, I think that might work. Does that look, it looks like a lot of nodding.
Especially if, if there's no sod there, but it would also be great, something that we could do with the local schools and get the kids involved with, and I think that would be, something that would be really great for the community.
Thank you. Other comments from council members? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Well, with regard to that, the community garden, especially the one that's by South Boulder Road, they do that every year. So there's a lot of expertise in town and people who can help with that, some ideas. But you're right, Mayor, it does take maintenance, it does take watering, so we need to factor that in too.
Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I appreciate that, and I really appreciated Liv and Shay coming and sharing their perspective with us. I didn't get a chance to say that earlier, but they are inspiring, and it's appropriate that we're talking about this contract tonight. I'll go ahead and move that we approve the contract award for community park maintenance booster projects.
With the friendly amendment.
With the friendly amendment from Councilmember Dickinson about the contingency.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? I just want to make a couple comments to staff. So the community, we got many emails about parks maintenance and streetscape maintenance, and we have seen irrigation failing. It's, the irrigation was all put in 20 to 30 years ago. It's at the end of its life, and there's a lot of work to be done. And I just want to thank staff for responding to the community and listening and coming forward with this project. It's nice to see that it's not just a bare minimum project, but really reflects what we heard from the Parks Board, what we heard from community members, and tries to address the concerns that have been raised. So I just want to really thank people for putting this presentation together, and we'll now hopefully be able to execute it. To Councilmember Lay's point, we have a lot going on with other issues right now, but people being able to enjoy our public spaces is a critical part of recovery. Just getting together, being able to see neighbors, and being able to have those positive interactions, particularly in such a well-loved asset, it's really important. And so I thank you so much for bringing this forward, and look forward to getting to see the final product. Any other comments from folks? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Fahey, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to comment. Thank everybody again for all the work that you've done. This is going to be amazing. I'm just wondering if there could be someone present on Saturday for the luncheon to kind of talk with people and see what the public would like to see. Maybe get some more ideas, or you'll be there. Okay, great. Thank you.
Great idea, Councilmember Fahey. All right. So there's a motion to award the Community Park Booster Project contract with the amendment to make sure the contingency is there, and we have a final comment from Councilmember Lay.
Maybe somebody can let the folks who provided information at the beginning about pollinators know that their comments were heard. And
they may be in bed right now, but we can definitely get them the information. So.
Well, public policy is just something that I'm sure that they would be delighted to know about.
Thank you, everyone. And so with that motion, I'll ask City Clerk Muth for a roll call vote on the motion.
Councilmember Most?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Mayor Stolzman?
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. And so just a reminder to folks watching at home and people still in the audience, when we have first readings on ordinances, it is to set a date so that we can have a public hearing and get comment and have a debate. And so the remaining business this evening are a series of setting public hearings. And so I don't want you to think we're just passing things without talking about them, but we're setting dates for which we will have those discussions. So first, I will move that we approve ordinance number 1828, series 2022, an ordinance amending section 17.20.170.c of of the Louisville Municipal Code allowing an alternative to installing electric vehicle charging infrastructure as part of the rebuilding of structures significantly damaged or destroyed by the Marshall Fire. This is our first reading, and we'll set the public hearing for the 3rd of May, 2022. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you, everyone. Next, I'll move we approve ordinance number 1829, Series 2022, an ordinance amending Title 17 of the Louisville Municipal Code to establish a banquet or reception hall use group and criteria for consideration of banquet halls as a special review use in specific zone districts. This is the first reading, and we'll set the public hearing for May 3rd, 2022. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you, everyone. Next, I move we approve ordinance number 1830, Series 2022, an ordinance amending the sewer use regulations set forth in Chapter 13.32 of the Louisville Municipal Code. This is our first reading, and we'll set the public hearing for the 17th of May, 2022. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you, everyone. That takes us to our city attorney's report.
I have no report this evening. Thank you, Mayor. But it is nice to see everyone in person.
Thank you, City Attorney Kelly. And that takes us to council comments, committee reports, and identification of future agenda items. Any council? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
I just want to note that our mayor is going to be testifying on a bill that we've been working on with Representative Burnett. And it's really untangling the pawnbroker law and the secondhand dealer law that one of the companies in town, the Pros Closet, is dealing with. So anyway, thank you, Mayor, for doing that.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown?
I just want to note that the Consortium of Cities is meeting tomorrow. We'll be talking about economic vitality. And then we will be having the Community Noise Roundtable on Monday morning of next week. And we'll continue to talk about how we are going to hopefully move forward with a contractor that will help us to assess whether or not we can change flight paths or encourage flight paths in different directions.
Thank you. I have a future agenda topic. Something that we left on our work plan was looking at commercial building codes. There have been many, many pledges of commitment from, I think, everyone on council to looking at the net zero commercial codes and looking at building codes more broadly with electrification. I have read many letters to the editor from all of us over the last month or so with lots of commitments to commercial sustainability and adamant pledges that we were going to do things. And so I would like to know that we are going to calendar those pledges and ensure that we have that discussion that's been committed to. I looked on the advanced agenda and I didn't see the commercial code update on there. And I think given all of the statements that have been made by everyone sitting up here, that I think we have an obligation to put that on the calendar and ensure that we have that discussion. So I don't think we have to set the date tonight, but there was a commitment to take it up in the first quarter. That was, of course, before the fire. So, you know, we are getting long in the tooth on this topic, and I think statements can be followed by action, and I would hope that we can see that before June or July. Other council comments for future agenda items? Seeing none, any other council committee reports? All right, thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.